Welcome to Therapist Off Script, a podcast designed with therapist in mind as we discuss all things psychotherapy practice, the good, the bad, and the truly mind-blowing adventures of being a therapist in process. Hang on as we dive deep, join together, and empower others for the journey of a lifetime. So you want to roll into today's podcast?
Yeah. So since previous episode, we were talking about the experience of the traineeship and that plus grad school and balancing that. And then I believe we talked about the application process to associateship before. We just do a little bit of that and then go into life as an associate, as that is the next main part of the path to licensure.
Yeah, let's do it. Welcome to Therapist Off Script. We are two therapists, Jen and
Alyx, in the mental health and wellness space, coming together from different points in our profession
to unlock the world of healing arts and all that it holds of being a psychotherapist in practice,
regardless of where we are in the process.
While we are therapists, this podcast is not meant to be therapy or supervision. Should we mention clients, we are committed to safeguarding our client confidentiality.
Please know that information presented here is intentionally de-identified, with details changed and are often a representation of common challenges we've witnessed within the struggles of life and simply being a human.
Come spend time with us as we show up as unapologetically us. We are Therapist Off Script.
All right. So yeah, I know I talked about my experience applying to the associate registration in the past. My process was not nearly as smooth as I wish that it was, or that the majority of people might have. So basically, you pay, you send a check for, I believe it's $150 now, plus an application that you fill out. That's what you do, as well as getting a live scan, your fingerprints done. What they also need is your transcripts from grad school, as well as a program certification form. The program certification form is something typically the program director or one of the higher ups will do. In my program's case, they also sent over the transcripts, but some programs don't do that for you. So that's something to keep in mind as well, just who does what, and make sure that that's clear. And then you wait. Unfortunately, who knows how long you have to wait. I think the average is 6 weeks, but somebody just told me now they're like 3.5 months behind.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind too. It's thinking about how you've just graduated and what do you do? Like, depending on the associate position, the 90-day rule applies, which we can talk about. But there are certain positions that if you want, you cannot actually start working and getting paid until you officially have that associate registration number. And the other thing that makes things trickier as far as, tracking, like, where is my application in the process? They may or may not cash your check right when they receive it. If they do, then yay, that's your confirmation that they've at least received it. Other times they might cash it right before you actually get your number. I think that's what happened with me. Then others, they cash it right when they receive it. So there's ambiguity there. And of course, it's not easy to get a hold of the BBS. You're not supposed to reach out to them to check the progress of your application. What you can and should do is include with your application materials that you send, like the live scan, the application, and the check, is a self-addressed envelope and pre-stamped and all of that fun stuff. And they will just send it right back to you. And that is essentially your confirmation that they've received it. And yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, also, if you follow them on Instagram for sure, maybe they post it on their Facebook too, but they'll post for each of the different types of licensure. So this is for associate, MFT, PCC, and MSW, as well as the license. Like all of the various things that you can possibly apply for is for path to licensure, regardless of the licensure track. They'll say we are processing applications that have been received within these dates. But again, like you don't really know all the time when exactly they received it.
One trick to that is, okay, so there's a couple things. One, would it be advisable? I know for me, when I applied for my associate, I waited for my degree to be conferred. I gained the paperwork from my school, and then I submitted a complete package because I have trust issues and I didn't want to trust them to do what they're supposed to do. Or it was because that's the way it was at the time. So I waited for my degree to be conferred, and then I mailed in a complete package. So there was little to no possibility that there were going to be any hiccups. Second, in that package, I put a postcard, a self-addressed, postage paid postcard. So when the BBS receives that, they will stamp it upon receipt, whether they're cashing your check or not. They'll stamp it upon receipt and they will send that back to you. I still have my postcards of when I did my, my associate, my license. Yeah, so I have all of that. And then I had applied for a second associate number because I was still working during the time. So that's something important to know. But we'll cover that when we get to license. The other thing is, you mentioned Instagram. Facebook is also really good with contacting the BBS, getting updates. I know the BBS does like live video streams. They were just covering AB 1759, which is like part of like the telehealth requirement. And then what was the other one? There's another one. Law and ethics requirement is part of AB 1759. So they were just doing an update and asking questions or answering questions live. So there was a couple different caveats there to what you were saying. So
cool. Yeah. So Instagram, Facebook, emailing them too for answers anytime you have a question. Basically anything, but don't call them.
Mm-hmm. Do you still hang up? I'm sorry. Do you still have to submit a picture as part of your packet too? Like a passport? Okay. We used to have to submit a passport photo in our packet for both associate numbers and licensure. Because when I would get to, I think it was Praxis back then. Is it still Praxis that does the test? Pearson?
Maybe.
I think it's a P word. Pearson. Okay, so I think it was Praxis back when I did it, but they will pull up your test and it has the photo that you submitted to the BBS as a way to confirm your identity. But of course, they also ask for identification within that. So
yeah, we didn't have to send in any pictures, at least for MFT. I don't know if the other license tracks do. I believe like when you go to the testing site, they take your photo there because in MFT Guide, the Facebook group that I'm a part of, they'll post like, oh, I passed my exam. And they have their photo that's like scanned on the sheet that tells them if they passed or not.
That's true. So, that's true. Because I remember doing that too, because my photo wasn't great. So it's like a DMV photo,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have like the worst DMV photo ID card right now, and I'm like trying to figure out how to get a new photo ID without them using the same photo. Like I look so bad. That is the worst photo I've ever taken in my life. Every time I open my wallet, I close it because my military ID looks great. The photo, I'll use that as identity instead. So, but I digress.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking about too. Like honestly though, because okay, if I have to have my photo taken, I'm already like not thrilled about the exams that I have to take as an associate. And there's like, you're lucky if I'm gonna show up at all. I mean, yes, I will show up. I have to, but I'm not gonna be in the right like mental headspace to put on a fake happy, yay, I got this look.
You're like all nervous, like because they take the photo in the beginning. So if you pass, hopefully you do. When you pass, you're holding up the paper and you cover your photo and you cover your address. I passed, like the MFT got photo.
Yeah.
This is what I did. This was my experience. Yeah.
But it's part of the journey. These are things you have to think about. Like all the little nuances. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Right.
So
even showing up for like the exams, I know we're kind of getting off topic and we'll come back. Even showing up for the exams, it was like, what do I wear? Okay, you can't wear any pockets. You can't wear like hoodies with like pockets, they provide like the earbuds, thankfully, because they had construction going on when I showed up. So yeah, it's like the ins and the outs. Make sure you take a snack, you'll get a locker. But I know, like when they say like do a brain break, like I had a break to like run to the bathroom and then run back, and I literally finished with like 4 to 8 minutes left. So like I didn't have time to eat a snack. I mean, like I'm running to the bathroom and eating. No. So I just had to hunker down and get it done. So okay, let's get back on track.
Let's see. Where were we? Oh yeah. So applying for the associate and waiting. So yeah, you've just graduated. You may or may not have been working throughout your grad program or have a job lined up. But that is something to consider, especially with how far behind they are. I mean, some people do the application process, yeah, like after the degree confirmed, but like right when you finish grad school. Others will take the summer off and vacation and travel, or just decompress after the heck of the experience that grad school tends to be. And then they're applying right around now, or maybe about a month ago. From what it seems, like the longer you wait to send in your application, the more delay there's going to be in you getting your associate number. So maybe what I recommend is apply, get your number, even if you don't plan on working, just get that associate registration application in as soon as you can. That way it's there waiting for you when you're ready to use it.
Right. So that if the opportunity comes along with like a private practice site, for example, because you can only work, you have to have your associate number before you can work in a private practice site. You don't want to miss an opportunity, right? The flip side is if you get your number sooner, but you're not using it, your clock is ticking on that 6-year rule.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's true.
Yeah, so that would be like the cost benefit analysis. So is there any other like risk or benefits of waiting other than not being able to count hours? Obviously, you can't work if you don't have your registration. Is there anything else you know of? I'm trying to recall.
Not that I can think of. I mean, yeah, like you said, I completely didn't even think about the 6-year. Like that's if you apply early, you get your registration number. I mean, think about it this way too. I guess everybody's different. When I applied in, I don't know, like May 27th-ish, and then I got my number in mid-June. Is that one? Yeah. So
I know someone who applied back in, I think it was August, and they're still waiting on their number. So that's the other good thing. And you may have already mentioned this. So if I'm repeating information, I apologize. On Facebook, I don't know about Instagram, so you can confirm if this is true or not, but they'll post like the timeline of applications. Did you mention that already?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I knew they posted it on Instagram, but I guess they posted on Facebook as well.
Yes.
And maybe also the DBS website.
Yeah. And then, yes. And then Dr. Ben Caldwell also will post it on his Caldwell Labs it's also on Facebook. He'll post it on there sometimes if memory serves me right. So yeah, some way, somehow I'm getting the updates and seeing that they are very behind. And then of course you have the holidays to think about right now that we're currently in the season. And so it could delay the applications further. And of course, we have a lot of graduates coming out. I know for me personally, my graduation date was December 14th. Don't ask me why I remember that, but I graduated on December 14th. And so like we have graduates that are coming in, and so they're graduating. We're now December 14th is next week, if that even lines up. And so getting your associate number in once your degree is conferred may be the route to go, so that you don't miss out on any opportunities.
Right. So I guess that's, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a decision that only you can make in terms of if you're planning on taking an extended vacation or time off, then maybe, plan when you apply accordingly, but also plan when you expect to get the associate registration. Because if you apply in a certain time, like let's say, you graduate on December 14th and they're already super behind and you're planning on taking a holiday break, maybe apply anyway, because then, if you're not going to get it for another 3.5 months or whatever it is right now, if you wait until after you come back from vacation, that's just that much longer that you're going to have to wait to get your associate registration and be able to start working and making money.
Right. So I don't know of any other repercussions other than you can't work and you can't gain hours, which is fine, because if the trade-off is I want to take the winter time off and begin working in the spring, when the spring comes, when everything's fresh and new, I'll go into as an associate. But what a lot of people may not think of is, as you're highlighting, it is go ahead when you graduate, as soon as your degree is conferred, apply for your associate, get your live scan and all of that, pay the application fee. And then plan on 4 months of waiting, even if it takes 6 weeks, which would be best case scenario. At least you have your registration on hand, so you're not missing out on opportunities come spring, if that's when you plan. If you plan on starting in the summer, then maybe you're applying, in the spring for your number. So plan a season ahead, which is our theme, seasons of a therapist. So we'll highlight that also of plan to submit your application a season ahead of when you want to start working. Makes it easy that way, right?
And that's important to think about also, is because depending on what type of site you're planning on applying to or working at, like if it's a private practice, I mean, there are some private practices that have a full caseload ready to throw at you, so that when you get your number, like cool, you're good to go. But a lot of places, once you get your number, cool, you're eligible to get private practice clients, but you may not have a full caseload right off the bat. You may get, it takes anywhere between, I don't know, 6 months to a year maybe to build a full practice, at least.
My experience has been anywhere from right away, like you're stating, all the way up to about 6 months and beyond. It depends on like a whole bunch of factors, but it also depends on the characteristics of the therapist and ideal client matching. And sometimes sites don't have that, where you're just getting whatever clients, right? Also something to consider, depending on your population, like your ideal client niches, summertime and holidays starting a job would probably be the worst time to start a job, because the ebbs and the flow of the mental health field, it tends to be a lower demand in the summer and the holidays, unless you are specifically tailoring. So like in the holiday season, family distress, relationship difficulties, communication, how to navigate toxicity within family relationships and family dinners and being together, like all those different things that you can really target, then maybe you will not notice an ebb and a flow during the holiday seasons, because that is a true need that the therapist is meeting during that time. And that's marketing and efforts and everything. So the best times to start your associate is going to be in the spring and the fall, in my experience.
Yeah. And so I know we mentioned the 90-day rule, so probably should talk a little bit more about that. So so this 90-day rule, between once you graduated and getting your number, you have 90 days that you can count hours if you're working at a nonprofit, right? Like the private practice does not apply, although it doesn't apply anyway, because you can't work until you actually have your number. So basically, if you have experience or you have a job that you can get hours and experience, you can count up to 90 days. But if you still have not received your associate registration number after the 90 days have passed, you don't get to count those hours. Do you still get to count the 90 days worth and then just nothing until you get like that window of time after the 90 days?
So the time you were in practicum, you would be able to count those hours. If you decide to wait on getting an associate number, basically that's a gap. And then you'd pick back up on gaining your hours once you get your associate number and have a work site and are gaining hours. If you are, say, for an example, you were a trainee at a nonprofit, you could continue working as long as you have applied for your associate registration, live scan, and all. Live scan is definitely one of the qualifiers, right? During that 90 days, and count the hours at that work setting. And then
there's something like you have to do a volunteer, like it's like as a volunteer, right?
You can do a volunteer. If you're doing volunteer, another caveat is to get your volunteer letter as part of that. So that's something good to know.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So that is applying. And so let's say you've received your associate number, you've got the job lined up, or you don't, and you're in the process of interviewing and applying, in which case go back to episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 1. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shout out to Mount Everest.
Oh man, yes. So that's that. So let's pretend that we are at our associate position. Track your hours, like keep track however you do, whether it's actually using the Track Your Hours website or Excel spreadsheet or whatever. I highly recommend Track Your Hours. And especially like now that I'm an associate and I have like the eye on the prize, which is my license, the first, I don't know, mini, yeah. So the first mini prize, I guess, is finishing all of my hours. I need 3,000 of them total. So I always have the tab up so I can look at it, which I don't know, has caused me anxiety sometimes because that means I have to have, yeah, I know, have it up and I can see, okay, I've completed the hours of all of the, I have all of the couples, families, and children hours. That minimum has been met. I'm gonna well surpass it just because that's literally like all I'm doing. I have some adults and groups, but predominantly couples is what I've been doing. So, which is what I wanted.
And you want to have at least 500 hours, is that correct? Within that category?
Yeah. Yeah. So you need 1,750 hours of direct counseling experience, and that could be individuals or couples, families, children, or groups. Of the 1,750 total direct hours, at least 500 of those have to be specifically couples, families, and or children.
Right. And it's so important that you're doing weekly entries. You don't necessarily need to do daily entries unless you're like that type of person where it helps and doesn't like the double-edged sword, right? So doing weekly entries of your hours because you don't want to sell yourself short and lose track. It's kind of like do your progress and it's the same day or within 24 hours because you're going to remember it more thoroughly if you document the closer to the session, right? Same thing with hours. If you're going to document closer to the session, the more you're going to remember. So there's some kind of like note keeping that you can do, like, okay, this is how many sessions I had. So this translates over to the hours. And then this is how many non-direct client hours, counseling hours of experience I had. But if you enter them weekly, you're not going to sell yourself short because you're closer to when it actually happened, right? And then of course, getting an hour signed at least every 10 weeks. Actually, you can do it weekly if you want, but I would say every 10 weeks. That way you fill up a sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I do. So I make it part of my like Monday ritual unless I forget or whatever. It's a whatever day I get to it. But in theory, it's every Monday. I'll go in and it's with Track Your Hours. Like it's just like a timesheet. So I can say like, okay, on Monday I did however many hours in this category and had supervision, yada, yada, yada. But I'll put in based on what my schedule looks like, provided that I have 0 no-shows, everybody shows up, everything happens. I put all of those hours in a week at a time on Monday. And then at the end of the day, each day, then I can adjust, okay, well, this person didn't show up. So then I can take away that direct hour and, you know, what did I do in that time frame? If I actually did something productive, then I can adjust and probably put, I don't know, workshops, training, or client-centered advocacy, or progress notes, reports, psych tests, etc. Yeah. So otherwise, I don't because I took a break.
Yeah, probably be a good segue to say you can claim up to 40 hours per week. I want to say it's a max of 6 supervision hours a week, but don't quote me on that. Is that correct? And like I'm just pulling from like old. And of course, the ratios from when you're a trainee versus an associate. So if you want to hear the ratios of trainee, refer to our first part 1 of this series of Seasons of a Therapist. As an associate, it is 1 unit for the first 10 of direct client hours, and then 1 additional unit for up to 40. And so it becomes easier from when you were a trainee when it was 1-to-5 ratio and you had to keep getting the 1-to-5 all the way through, right? As an associate, it's 1 unit for the first 10, a second unit for up to 40, and units is 1 hour of individual or triadic equals 1 unit, 2 hours of group equals 1 unit. And so you want to have 1 to 2 units per week. And of course, you need at least 1 unit of supervision in order to count experience during that week.
Yeah, and that's per site.
Correct.
So if you're working if you're working 2 sites, then in theory, like that puts you at the 6-hour maximum. If you're doing 2 hours of group and 1 unit of, or 1 hour individual for each, that's 3 and 3. But in order to count 20 or 10 plus hours each site for each week, that's your max. So if you're at a site where they only do group, and there are a lot of sites that do that, and that's at, like, let's say I have one site that only does group, so I would have to do 4 hours of group supervision to get the 2 units there. But then at the other side, if I do 2 hours of group and 1 unit of individual to get my 2 units there, that's 7 hours. So that's going to be a problem. So
I wonder how that works if you have one supervisor for all sites. So you have an oversight agreement in place.
And that's what
you did. Okay, so that could be like a loophole, is to have one supervisor on multiple sites so that you're getting that. So it's just the 1 to 10 and then 2 to 4 up to 40.
Yeah, so what I did for mine is I have 2 hours of group supervision and 1 hour of individual. Perfect. At site A. And then I do still do 2 hours of group supervision at site B with that supervisor, who's a different supervisor. But then I also have my site A supervisor who offered to do individual supervision and oversight for free for me.
Very nice. That's pay it forward right there. That's the one that's like, yes. It's also important to have supervision forms in place for each of your direct supervisors. So that would be the supervisor responsibility statement. And then of course, later down the road, it's the hours verification, experience verification form. And then of course, your hours log would be part of that, looking forward.
Yeah, and I have on my calendar, I have a Google Calendar that I keep track of like everything. Well, I have like 10 different calendars, but that's, me. But I put on like in red, like this is a send hours to get signed week. Actually, I think this is a send hours to get signed week now that I'm looking at it. Yep. So after all of my hours are done on Friday, then I'll download the forms, email them off, because you're allowed to get them electronically signed, which is super helpful. And then they'll send the forms back to me signed, and then I save them online, and then I also print them out.
Yeah. And then something else to mention is when you get your first associate number, that is good for 6 years. And then as a reminder, and then the second associate number, you can apply for it, but the front end of your hours are going to start expiring, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Also in your second associate number, so 6 years and beyond, you cannot work in a private practice. So that's something to keep in mind also. So as a trainee, you can only work in a nonprofit, a government site, a school-based setting, right? Then as you get your associate number, that opens up private practice world to you. Then with your second registration, you have to go back into the nonprofit, school-based government entities. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So basically the door opens and then it closes, or you were like, exactly, trainee world. Ugh. Right. But also, but life happens sometimes, or if you are at a site that doesn't give you a lot of the hours that you needed and you get pushed behind, it's options. And
it's good training, because I walk in both worlds of nonprofit and private practice. They overlap, but they're very distinctual. So I was just talking in group supervision earlier, the kind of like the county-based forms differ from like a private practice. So the way you work with, say, insurance in county will differ than the way you work with insurance in private practice. So there's intricacies. There's another word intricacies that I'm not going to be able to say. Say it for me, Alyx.
Intricacies? You said it.
Idiosyncrasies? I don't know.
Oh, you said it right without thinking.
Well, I'm beating myself up and I'm overthinking it now. So, but there is differences between the two, but they also overlap. So being a more well-rounded therapist and being able to walk in either world that you want to walk in after your license, it's good to take advantage of the different kind of sites and get that thorough training. Some people will go in and they'll just have one site, which is fine if that is your passion and your drive, where they don't get any of the training in private practice. And so so that now they have their license and they want to merge into private practice, there are some distinctual differences over in private practice world that you will not have been trained on. And so it could be like a harder road for you to be able to make that transition. Not impossible, but you don't know what you don't know. So take advantage of the different training and experience opportunities that are out there, because that's what this time is for, is experience.
Yeah.
And then of course you can be a W-2 or a volunteer. So if you're going as part of your BBS paperwork, you'll have to have either your volunteer letter or your W-2. And I believe they ask for a pay stub. Not 100% sure on that. There's old information popping up. You may know that information more than me, but just something to think of. Make sure you have your volunteer letter in place. And hopefully you're not working as a volunteer as an associate, because you know how I feel about all of that. Everyone should be compensated for their dedication and time, especially those who don't have as much experience usually are working with clients who have higher demands and more needs. So
yeah. Okay, let's see what's next in the exams.
Yeah, that'll probably cap us off. Have just enough time to cover exams.
Well,
so
that sets us up for, so as an associate, within your first year of getting your associate number, you have to at least attempt the law and ethics exam. You don't have to pass it, which is comforting, but ideally would like to pass the first time so that I don't have to take it again. But yeah, so attempt the law and ethics exam. That's big exam number 1. And then you take the clinical exam after you've completed all of your hours. So back when I said track your hours is something that I always have up, and it's helpful to see, but it's also anxiety inducing. There's a setting on track your hours that you can set your target completion date for your hours. And so I have it set for June 30th of next year, because I think that actually, no.
I was like, that would be so awesome. Like June 30th of 2023 is where your trajectory is for finishing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then it shows you. Yeah. So, and it shows you like your weekly target, like of how many hours of each category you need in order to meet that goal. I mean, provided that every single one of my clients shows up, I can do it. I'm expecting to push it back to July, whatever the last day of July is, to finish my hours. And then if I can do that, submit my application for licensure, and that's going to take however long. And then I get situated to take the exam, take the clinical exam, and that's the license.
Right. And something to mention with that is if you're on your second registration number, so we're pulling in AB 1759, which does away with the 12-hour requirement. If you happen to not pass your law and ethics, you used to have to take 12 hours before you could test again. It's then law and ethics. So it does away with that. AB 1759 with law and ethics, you're required to take 3 hours upon each renewal of your associate. So you renew on a yearly basis. And so within that, you have to do a law and ethics, continuing education. When you get to your 6th year, your second registration, you cannot renew that registration unless you have passed your law and ethics. So you have to keep trying to pass it. So that's something to mention there. And then while we're on AB 1759, to go off track for just a moment, is also a telehealth requirement to get 3 hours. And that's whether you're registration or licensed. You have to get 3 hours, one-time requirement. Sorry, the telehealth is a one-time requirement. Don't let me give you wrong information. Telehealth, you must have law and ethics related to telehealth. It is a one-time requirement. I am talking right. Telehealth is a one-time requirement. That's effective July 1st, 2023, and that's for registrations and licensees, whereas the law and ethics 3 hours takes effect January 1st, 2023. So if you are due to renew your registration after January 1st, 2023, then you have to have the 3 hours. Hopefully I did not just confuse a whole bunch of people. So I recommend that you look at this Assembly Bill 1759, research it for yourself so that you're all in order. So yes.
Basically, in short, so there's two extra like mini courses in a sense that you have to take. So to recap, come January 1st, 2023, there are 2 little like mini courses or continuing education units that you have to take. One is for telehealth. That is a one-time thing, and that's actually, was it July? You said July 1st, 2023. Yep. So starting July 2023. that's when the telehealth specific CEU is required. And then January 1st is telehealth. So in theory, for me, I mean, I'm still
first is law and ethics.
son of a bitch.
I love this so much because you were supposed to make it easier. Do you see the struggle I was enduring as I'm trying to like say it? So go for it.
Okay.
Now you're gonna overthink it.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, so January 1st, 2023, law and ethics, mini course / continuing education units. In order to renew your associate registration, that is what you have to take. If you are renewing your associate registration on or after July 1st, 2023, you also have to take the telehealth mini course /
requirement.
Right.
And that's licensees also. So it's licensees too.
Okay. And that's a one-time thing. So once you're licensed, like you take that and then you're good.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then as an associate, the law and ethics is in every single year you have to apply or renew your associate number. You also have to take the law and ethics, which makes sense. Laws and ethics change. So
yeah,
it's helpful for us to, stay up to date.
And for those who are licensed, we do 6 hours every registration renewal, which is every 2 years, which is also 3 years per year, if you think of it that way. So really across the board, it's across the board for both of us on both AB 1759s. So just plan on taking 3 hours of law and ethics every year. And then with the telehealth, get that knocked out before July 1st, 2023, because you're going to need that to renew. And they're going to do an attestation saying that, yes, I have met it. And of course, they can audit and request proof that you have met those requirements. So keep that in mind because you're going to have to ethically attest that you have met that requirement. So meet the requirement.
Yeah. And as for the law and ethics CEUs, I'm thinking in terms of like my timeline with having to take the law and ethics exam. I mean, I'm still going to do an official prep program of some kind.
I literally wrote that down, Alex. I was going to recommend, and you're like, we're in tune. That's awesome. I was getting ready to recommend. Which one are you going to recommend? It's probably the same one.
Therapist Development Center.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll still do that, but I wonder if, having to take the law and ethics CEUs will also help because financially, I'm not able to get the prep program until after the holidays for sure, maybe February.
Yeah, there were some free things. I know you're no longer on Slack, the Slack channel.
Yeah, Ben Caldwell's offering something, or there's something through Simple Practice.
Thank you. Okay, so you already know about it. Yeah. So Dr. Ben Caldwell is another one to mention alongside Therapist Development Center is because he is like the guru of everything law and ethics. He is a huge advocate in our field. Within the realm of law and ethics and a trusted source. So shout out to Ben there. Do not know him personally, but he is one of my go-to places. So he has a Facebook group. I mentioned it earlier, Caldwell Labs. Excellent. I know he's on Twitter. Don't know how long he'll be on Twitter with all the ups and downs of Twitter. But Therapist Development Center, one thing is when I was getting ready to study for my law and ethics and my clinical, they offer both. I am not really an auditory learner, so that's something to take into it. But I would still recommend them, even though it's all auditory, because what I did was I would type up or write out the notes as I was listening to Amanda Rowan, I think her name is. And her voice was in my head during that time because of she's also a trusted source within that. So, but I would take the notes and then that would translated over to my learning style. So I was able to absorb the information. So.
But there's also prep books and there's also you can get one-on-one sessions. Like Nancy Klein is a big name that gets thrown around a lot to do group classes or one-on-one sessions.
AATBS is another. It's not one that I would go with, but some people have different learning styles. And then Grossman is another. Grossman was very dry for me, but some people really enjoy that kind of method of absorbing information. So.
Something for everyone. You just got to figure out what works for you and then go off of that. Yeah. So that's why it's anxiety inducing to me. Okay, I can see when I'm going to probably finish my hours. And yes, of course I can take a break and stuff, but we all know I'm not going to do that. So okay, I have to get my crap together to study for the law and ethics exam, pass the law and ethics exam, and then recuperate enough time before I have to start actually preparing for the clinical exam. And I'm probably going to end up having to prepare for the clinical exam before I finish my hours, just because I know myself and my test anxiety and all of that. So
yeah. I'll add a couple things to that. So test anxiety, something that really helped me, because when I sit down to do a test back then, my mind would go blank, like for the first portions of the questions. And I know that about myself. So if I was unsure, I would read the things over and over and over, right? But you can mark it to go back to. A trick is you have 170 questions in 4 hours, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that correct? Okay. So I did 4 quadrants, and I divided those 170 questions into each of the 4 quadrants. So 170 divided by 4 went into, the different ratios went into that. When I got to my first hour, I knew I needed to be at like question 35 or whatever it is, right? And I was behind, so I knew I needed to pick up my pace to be able to finish the test on time. So that really helped me. There was I can't think of the other thing right now. It'll probably come to me. If not, then I'll say it next episode. So
yeah,
now it's bothering me. Something with test prep. So I was thinking, like, when you were talking about track your hours, it's like a gym membership where you get like the incentives, you get that intrinsic motivation because you see the meter moving up in the direction towards
the blue line is gradually getting all the way across.
Yeah. Oh, I know what it was. Speaking of holidays, the second thing I want to say is that we may be taking a break between now through the holiday season. And so episode 3 is going to be on, once you're heading towards that licensure, what that looks like and beyond.
Yep.
Yeah.
And obviously, Jen, you have much more to say about that than I do. So
I think we both have value along all the paths, even though I'm like more far removed from like the trainee and associate. You're like in the thick of it now, but as you're talking, like, I remember. And then of course things were different when I was an associate than now when you're an associate, but there's some similarities. So, and then of course, as a supervisor, you have to keep up to date. You may not know it all, but you need to, know where to go to get the information. So yeah. It helps for me to stay like in these conversations, to stay fresh in my own knowledge base. So it's good.
Makes sense to me.
If you'd like to hear more, please do not forget to like and subscribe on your favorite platform.
You can learn more about us at therapistoffscript.com or by visiting us on Instagram at therapistoffscript.
We welcome connections, comments, and feedback,
or to simply say hi,
by engaging with us on Instagram or through our website.
Thanks for spending time with us today, where we dive deep, join together, and empower others. We are Therapists Off Script.
Be sure to check out our show notes for links and resources shared within this episode. We only had one blooper.
Woo!
When you tried to clarify, that was
I
enjoyable.
deserve that. Feel free to use it. I know you're going to.
I'm going to. We're a very good team. I'm trying to like balance like the bloopers with like the more informational pieces because I don't want people to think like we're goofing off the whole time, even though it's a lot of fun.
We are. So